Hi, everybody. My name is Paul Hewitt. I'm certified lay minister with the Green Valley United Methodist Church in Henderson, Nevada. Each week during our separation due to the coronavirus, I'm going to do a study of the scripture that Pastor Jim will be preaching on. This study will be posted in advance of Sunday morning, so you can get a sense of what the foundation is for the sermon. While all sermons are based on scripture, they tend to focus how we apply it in our own lives in the here and now. And I'm going to try and dig into the verses and give some context or background and look at why this has so much meaning to the audience and the author and who they were addressing. You might call it sort of an academic look rather than a practical look. Our scripture for this Easter Sunday is from the Gospel of John, chapter 11, verses 17 through 25. There's so many verses that could be used as a foundation for an Easter sermon, but these verses keep in line with Pastor Jim's I Am sermon series. These verses are very profound and give an insight as to how people viewed resurrection. First, remember, Jesus had not been resurrected yet. So the people were looking at the concept of resurrection from an Old Testament lens. First, let's look at the location. Bethany. Now, unless you really dig into the minutiae of the Bible, it's likely you don't have a concept of what Bethany was. First, the name Bethany is Greek, but it's probably derived from the Aramaic or Hebrew. Bethany means house of affliction or house of figs. I've also seen it defined as house of poverty. It was a small little town of maybe 20 houses, and just from its name we realize that it was not a luxurious place in any way. But this place was special to Jesus. It was where he stayed when he was near Jerusalem. Lazarus and Mary and Martha were there, and we all know how special those three were to Jesus. It was also the home of Simon the leper. And it was in Simon's house during dinner that a woman came in and poured expensive perfume on Jesus from an alabaster jar. We also read in Luke 24 that Jesus brought his disciples out to Bethany, where his ascension took place. And Bethany was a place that Jesus felt really comfortable. Bethany is on the eastern slope of the Mount of Olives, about 2 miles east of Jerusalem, on the road to Jericho. It was not a long or difficult walk to get from Bethany to Jerusalem. Now, I know I'm getting a little bit off topic from our scripture, but I have to talk about Jesus' walk for those 2 miles and what it must have been like after that. The road from Bethany probably curved around the highest part of the Mount of Olives, but to come in gently from the south. The road goes by the gardens at Gethsemane, and then you go across a little gully to enter Jerusalem. Now, I won't go into details of all the events that took place on that night in the garden, but what is striking to me is Gethsemane is literally just across a little gully from the Golden Gate where Jesus would enter Jerusalem. Now, we all know that Jesus agonized in that garden because he knew what he was facing in the days to come. Now imagine what it must have been like for Jesus to be able to look across that little gully and see that Golden Gate that was only about a quarter to a half mile away. He could look at that gate the entire time he was in the garden, knowing what would happen when he went into that gate. Now, let's look at our verses. Verse 17. In verse 17, we find that Jesus had arrived. Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. Now, if we look at the prior passages, we find that Jesus had actually stalled for a couple days before he headed to Bethany. Now, Jesus loved Lazarus and Mary and Martha, and I would have thought that he would have rushed to Lazarus' aid, but instead he stalled and didn't arrive until the 4th day. Martha watched for him, and she went out regularly to hope he would be coming down the road. And when he did come, she went out to meet him. And this is where our exchange took place. I think I'm safe in saying that Martha was not very happy with Jesus at this point. She says to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." The fact that Jesus didn't arrive until that 4th day is very important. Following tradition, embalming and burial in a rock-hewn sepulchre would take place on the day after death. Now, according to rabbinical tradition, the soul of the departed one hovers over the grave for 3 days in hope of reuniting with the body. But the first sign of decomposition, the soul departs. But Martha still had incredible faith in Jesus when she tells him, "Even now," meaning the 4th day, even now in the 4th day, "I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you." Now Jesus says to her that her brother will rise again. Although she has great faith, it is the 4th day, so she says, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Although there was the belief of resurrection someday for Martha, that last day was some time off in the future. Even the assurance of Jesus didn't relieve the pain that Martha felt or the sorrow of losing her brother. Because Lazarus was well liked, there were a lot of people around to comfort the family. They'd come from the surrounding area to mourn Lazarus. And now Jesus speaks to Martha. And you can only imagine how all those ears perked up to listen. You can be assured that their hearts were uplifted. Then as they are today when Jesus said, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die." This is a claim that is made confidently and everywhere in the New Testament. What Jesus says is that he has leapt across the barriers between life and death. It is our promise for the future. "Whosoever believes in me shall never die." Jesus is telling us that all of our experiences, all the wonderfulness of this earth, do not go away, but they lead to something vastly better. Then Jesus asked Martha, "Do you believe this?" And Martha answered that she did. But was she just trying to be brave? I mean, she was human. As a human being just like us, I'm sure she had to wrestle with her faith. So, yes, this week we celebrate the risen Lord. If we were all together in the church building, we'd greet each other by saying, "He is risen." And we reply, "He is risen indeed." In our hearts and our souls, we should stress that very last word as an expression of our faith. Yes, he has risen. Indeed, he has risen. One of the greatest proclamations of the Bible is when Jesus tells us, "He who believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And whosoever lives in me shall never die." So yes, we celebrate the resurrection of Christ, but we also celebrate the assurance of our resurrection as well. This is a promise from God. Have a wonderful Easter.